Hello, and welcome to the Wine Enthusiast Podcast, your serving of drinks culture and the people who drive it. I'm JC Tops. This week, we're highlighting wine bars. What is a wine bar anyway? And what separates the good ones from the great ones? Is it the wine program, the food, the ambiance, or is it the ability to foster a sense of community or belonging? Danille, Callegari, and Jeff Porter, wine enthusiasts, Italian wine reviewers, and writers at large, wanted to highlight one of their favorite Tuscan wine bars. So they sat down with Enoteca Bellini, who owns and operates a wine bar in the heart of Florence named Enoteca Bellini. So listen on as Camilla discusses the impact her parents had on her business, her experience as a woman in the wine industry, the relationship between Italy and Champagne, how she created her wine program, and why she feels it's important for everyone to feel welcomed in her space. Every glass of wine tells a story. These stories reveal hidden histories, flavors, and passions, and sometimes they unravel our darkest desires. In Wine Enthusiast's newest podcast, Vinfamous, journalist Ashley Smith dissects the underbelly of the wine world. We hear from the people who know what it means when the products of love and care become the source of greed, arson, and even murder. Each episode takes listeners into the mysterious and historic world of winemaking and the crimes that have since become vinfamous. This podcast pairs well with wine lovers, history nerds, and crime junkies alike. So, grab a glass of your favorite wine and follow the podcast to join us as we delve into the twists and turns behind the all-time most shocking wine crimes. Follow Vinfamous on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen, and be sure to follow the show so you never miss a scandal. New episodes drop every other Wednesday.
Howdy, everybody. My name is Jeff Porter, and welcome to the Wine Enthusiast Podcast. I'm a writer at large for Wine Enthusiast covering Northern Italy, and I'm here with my colleague, Danille Callegari.
Hi, I am also a writer at large at Wine Enthusiast covering Italy, only I do Tuscany and the south of Italy, while Jeff takes over the north, king in the north as he is. We are so excited today to be talking with Enoteca Bellini, who owns one of our favorite wine bars in Florence and who is going to talk to us a little bit about what it's like owning, operating, and simply managing at the day-to-day level a place that's trying to bring some of the best Italian wines to the casual and hopefully engaged drinker in the beautiful medieval city that is Firenze. Camilla, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi.
Maybe we can begin by just having you tell everyone a little bit about yourself, very simply, and then we'll talk wine together.
Sure. I was born and raised in Florence. My mom is from the US and my dad is from Florence. I grew up in a city center, and my mom is the one that got into the wine business. She had a passion for wine. She decided to do a sommelier course when I was probably a kid still. I know everybody assumes that it's my dad because he's Italian, but it's actually my American mom that got into wine. And then she started in the wine business, and then she was contagious, I guess, because my brother is now an enologist, and I own a wine bar with my father in the center of Florence. So yeah, it was a bit of an impact on us, obviously.
Where is your mom from in the United States?
She's from San Francisco.
Growing up, did you split time? Did you go visit your grandparents in the Bay Area?
Unfortunately, no. I mean, we had wonderful times visiting my grandparents, but they had moved to New Jersey and then Pennsylvania. So those are the two areas that I've visited the most, and some Long Island as well, because I have an uncle who lives there. And,
you mean, fortunately, you got to go to New Jersey?
Yeah, I mean, no, I wish that
unfortunately.
No, I mean, I wish that I had seen a little bit more where my mom grew up in the Bay Area of San Francisco. I've always been curious, but they had all moved. So I just didn't happen to go in that area. But yeah, she actually came to Italy to study art in university. She wasn't really into wine. I think she's always liked it, but it wasn't anything that she thought that she could be doing. And then my dad, who's an agronomist, and he's an expert in olive oil. So, I mean, I grew up, I guess, very spoiled with very good, high quality food in Italy. So I feel like they sort of, that's my background, basically.
I feel like that's my dream, to have an olive oil dad and a mom wine, and like, oh my God, that's like truly the quintessential like Italian combination that I think a lot of us in the States have this idealistic notion. I was like, oh, it's the Bella Vita, and like you're the epitome, you're the birth child of two great passions.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I consider myself very lucky. I mean, I am very picky though, because when I go places, but I mean, but it's good. It's good to know where things come from, and the quality of them, and why do they exist, and how you use them. And so I grew up a lot with that. Like olive oil, you don't cook everything in it, you use it raw, and just there's a bunch of things that are definitely part of my lifestyle that I could never change.
Growing up in Florence, and being able to, have the wine culture around you, and be able to drink sooner than you would like where I grew up in the States. What was your first memory of the wine bar that you walked into Florence, and what struck you about it then? And did that help inspire what you're doing today?
Absolutely. Actually, my parents, they've always sort of, for like special occasions, we would go to Procacci in Via Tornabuoni, which is an institution. And it was just the idea of a very elegant but simple place. And they always had options that I would have tomato juice that they would make themselves. And it was fancy. It was great. It was nice to put on a nice dress and go to this place and have the respect. You would have the respect for the people working there, because you can tell that it was like a proper job that, you work really hard to do. And I think that's something in the service industry in Italy that we still have that's really important. And they take a lot of pride in how they dress and how they act and everything like that. So that was a great example. But the place that really impacted me was Le Volpe e l'Uva. Basically, thanks to the Volpe e l'Uva, I exist and a bunch of other people exist. It was the first wine bar in Florence to do something different. They introduced Nebbiolo, for example, to us Tuscans, which we didn't really, it wasn't that easy to access a long time ago. I mean, my parents used to take me there when I was a kid, and I used to be so bored. But I mean, we used to go there all the time, and I'm in really good. We're really good friends, and we send each other people, and we help each other out, and they've been really great, and I can only learn from them. So those places impacted me a lot, and I like the fact that Le Volpi isn't as fancy as Procacci, so you can have both of these worlds in this world, sort of in the wine world. There's a bit of both. And I love both. I can safely say that for sure.
Well, so this is great background, and it's also, I think, if any of our listeners are familiar with Florence at all, I think those are two perfect poles, right? They're places that you're always going to be recommended if somebody likes wine and has been to Florence. They're going to send you in that direction, right? And they're kind of capturing it. But getting to when you decided to actually make your own place within that space, I think two things that Jeff has already sort of danced around here that might be useful for us to talk about are not just how do you find a space for yourself there, but also the passion of your parents bleeding through to your generation is one thing, but you being a young woman and trying to open up a business in that space is a very different thing. So where do you feel like you got that energy from, and how did you carve out space for yourself within that? And I point to also this idea of like, when you're young, seeing Nebbiolo for the first time on a wine list, which even in I wasn't in Florence when I was a child, but 20 years ago when I first started going there, it was Tuscan or nothing. And so we've all walked through that timeline together of what's available, what wasn't. So how did you find your space there, and then work within that to maybe open up for yourself and others wine world?
Well, I mean, it's funny because the reason why I sort of ended up doing this was because I wasn't really great in school, in a sense. I just didn't know what I wanted to study, and I've always worked in bars for other people, and I've always loved the feeling of getting stuff done so that people can have a good time. I've always loved that, the atmosphere. And so my dad, he had this dream of having a wine bar. Actually, it was his dream, not mine so much. And he thought, why don't we do this together? We can do a project together and you can run the place because you already have experience running, restaurants and bars. And so we decided to do this. And it's interesting because, I've always was surrounded by it. I have to say, my mom is the person that probably gave me the biggest impact, apart from my dad opening up the space, having the idea. But my mom is the one that growing up, she had a library that instead of books, it was full of wine bottles, because she traveled, and for her job, she had to taste a lot of, she needed samples. And so she always had samples from all over Italy. She represented Italian wines, trying to sell them outside of Italy. So we had wines from the very north to the very south. And that's sort of how I found out that there was more to, it wasn't just Tuscany. It wasn't just Chianti Classico, but there was Etna, which, now it's very, very popular, but until, it wasn't that. Even I remember opening up in Florence about 8 years ago, having by the glass in Etna was still something special. Now, not so much, but almost 10 years ago, it was still something that it wasn't that common in Tuscany. I think people expect to come here and always only have Tuscan wine, but that is something that in my family, we just never understood completely. We love Tuscan wine, but there's so much. Just the geography of Italy, it's long. And so we have all these different types of, climates and terroirs and everything. And so, we can't not think about that part too, So, yeah, I think it's the combination of all of these things together. So, I don't know if that's answering the question. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah, no worries. I think to go back a little further, you'd mentioned you'd worked prior to opening up, and for those that didn't hear this, your wine bar is called Enoteca Bellini.
Mm-hmm.
And before you opened Enoteca Bellini, what other places did you work in, and what styles of service were they?
I worked from a pizzeria to I guess they call them bars here. They're open from the morning until late at night. So you have from the cappuccino and the coffees in the morning until the lunch service, and then the aperitivo, and then after dinner drinks. I worked in so many different places. I worked in pubs. I've learned a lot about beer actually before learning about wine, because that's a funny thing. In Italy, a lot of young people are a lot more attracted to, cocktails and beer. That's when I grew up, my friends, everybody, that's what we drank. That's what we cared about. Wine, not so much. Wine is something that is changing now. I think that a lot of young people are going into wine, but it's new. And you would assume that that Italians are always drinking wine all the time, but not really. It depends. It really depends on how you grew up and where you grew up. And I think that was I was very curious about other things than wine, but maybe that's even because I was so surrounded by it that I wanted to explore different things.
And I think you nailed it on the head. When you're, if you're a native of New York and you walk by the Empire State Building, it's always been there, right?
Yeah.
It's the same. Like you walk in the Palazzo Vecchio, you're like, man, whatever. And I go there and I'm like, holy shit, what is this place? It's, I'm not from New York either. I see the Empire State Building. I'm still like, holy cow. And for me as a person from a non-wine culture, wine was just like this big thing. Like whiskey and beer was like de rigueur. And so I can totally see that flip in Italy. Like all the kids are like, our parents drink this stuff. Let's try something different.
Yes.
But could you go maybe a little deeper into that change? Because I've been seeing it, I've been surrounded and focused on Italian wine for 20 years now and seen this evolutionary shift, which I find really exciting, because I think on your side in the Enoteca space and the wine bar space, there's an energy focusing on these producers. But like our mutual friends, how we met, Maddalena and Matteo of Ciliano da Sopra and Chianti Classico, both young, vigorous people that are energizing the space in a different way. Can you talk about that kind of, culmination of energy coming together and what it looks like today in Italy?
So you mean just like the drinking aspect of the
the drinking, but also the philosophical, like people going into agriculture, people going into the hospitality, because they're both spaces that are hard. It's not like tech, right?
Yes.
It's the income's not as high, the lifestyle is different.
No, I just think it's interesting because I think, there is still it's very strong in Italy, the fact that you sort of end up doing what your parents do. I mean, that is still something that happens a lot. So agriculture, I think there's a lot of that there. But then again, when my brother started studying enology in university at Agraria in Firenze, that opened up a new world to me. And I found out all these people who came from families who didn't really care about wine just had this passion and were going for it. And I do think it's because wine has changed a little bit in the recent years, in the sense it's a lot more accessible to young people. I mean, to me, before when I was little, it just seemed like such a faraway world, you had to have money, it was sort of an elite type of world. And now it's a lot more, it's going back to sort of the roots, because it was so normal to have wine on your table, lunch and dinner. It didn't matter what was going on. That was just normal. And it was very normal. I grew up with my grandfather putting water in his wine every single day. Like I don't think he've ever really had a glass of wine without water in it. And it was just something common to do. So I don't know. It's very interesting. I wonder I think it's just the thing that is changing about wine, and it's more accessible. And so people are not so intimidated by it, I guess. But the interesting thing is that for me, cocktails were something, it's always been sort of tied to the American bar cocktails, and Italians went crazy for it. And they're really good at making them. I mean, they're really good at the service of them, and some of the best, cocktail bars in the world are in Italy. And so they really went for that. And I think that brought along a lot of young people. And now it's going back to sort of wine as well. But, and maybe that's because of the natural wine movement. I think that is sort of making it more interesting and more accessible to young people, because I think it's not as stuffy, maybe sometimes. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, so, thinking about, you have your own place, you get to build the program. How did you make your selections? What are you offering to people? How do you feel that, I think in a best case scenario, and I see that in Enoteca Bellini, there's a narrative behind, like, I can understand what you're trying to say by reading your shelves, right? You talked about your mother having a library of wine in this literal sense, right? So I take a look at when I look at someone's list, or I look at somebody's shop and I see what they have there, I think of it as reading. It's also because that's how I have an academic formation. So it's my, way of conceiving things. And I look at it and I see a story, and I see, what you have chosen, saying to your audience, or your clients, your guests in this case, what you think about Italian wine right now. So how did you come up with that story, your narrative, what's informing it? And maybe also, if I can add an addendum immediately, what do you see changing right now? I think the main philosophy we've always had, and this is something that maybe still comes from my family, the wine that we've always had, it has to be good quality, clean, and elegant. That is sort of the base. If it's a natural wine, if it's a more conventional wine, traditional wine, whatever, that's always comes into second place. Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting to be able to taste a little bit of everything. And there's a reason why traditional wines are like that, and conventional wines are like that, and natural wines are like that. I mean, I think to know wine, you have to know a little bit about all types of wine. I think that's very important, especially at the beginning when you're learning. And I feel like I'm always learning. I mean, this world is huge. It's enormous. And more countries and more places are adding up to it. There's a new world, and that is so interesting as well. So I've had wines from New Zealand, from Australia, comparing, Sauvignons from New Zealand and from Italy and from France all together. And it's been so much fun. And it's nice to have a place that you can do that and have blind tastings with people and create that space, because I think those aspects are very interesting. And I think I've learned more about geography drinking wine than anything else in my life, definitely more than in school. And it's so interesting that we have the access of that in this world right now, where we can buy almost everything from the other side of the world. We've always tried to have that. That is something I think that's really important for us. But it always comes in second, how it was made. I mean, it's always important, the perception in the mouth and the nose and what you're drinking, because we've always
try to give priority to the conversation and to the people having fun, and not so much on the wine. If the wine is good, you're not going to be talking about it that much. You're going to be enjoying your time, having a good time with your friends. That's sort of how I've sort of grown to like understand how it interacts with myself personally. If there's something weird with the wine, then you start talking about it, and you're not having a conversation, you're not celebrating, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing with other people, and then you focus on that. So I always find that very interesting, and I love the fact that I've had dinners with friends or have clients at the end of having great conversations, and at the end of the bottle, like, oh, by the way, this was amazing. And that is such a good sign. And the bottle's finished, obviously. But, and that's sort of how we've always decided to choose the wine, especially things that we personally drink and we love. And it's hard because sometimes you even have to get out of your comfort zone. I have to say that I've had issues with that because I like high acidity, whites, mineral, and not everybody loves those. So it's nice to challenge yourself and try new things. And because if it's a business, you can't just, have only the things that you like.
Right. Yeah.
But it's an interesting challenge. I like it. It's interesting. I would have never thought that I would have like certain wines that I always thought maybe in my head, no. So I love that part as well. So I don't know. I get lost talking because I'm Italian and I just start going.
You're talking to the right people. Jeff and I, all we do is drink, tannic reds all day. And so we're always like, it would be great trying to push people into the total opposite. And they're like, no, we came for Italian wine. Yeah.
Well, two questions, because I have a wine question, but I'll hold it for a little bit longer. But I want to go back a little further just to get a timeline. When did you open Bellini?
In 2015.
2015. Okay. So you and Danielle alluded to this, and I feel so guilty because I started coming to Florence when I became the ambassador of Chianti Classico. I started doing a lot of work with them in 2016. First time I'd ever been to Florence. I was one of those assholes was like, I don't need to go to Florence. It's covered with tourists. F this place. And then I go for the first time. It's like, holy shit, it's the best place in the world. I see why it's strewn with tourists because it's such a beautiful, amazing city. So I apologize for not having come sooner. Being a young woman in a world that is seemingly very machismo, the innate identity of like in the caricature of Italian existence, this just very male dominated patriarchal society. What was the beginning like? Because in 2000, you were an early adopter, even though there's been lots of bars in Florence since time memoria. The moment I walked in your place, there's an energy, there's a special quality to it. I've been to a lot of other wine bars in Italy itself, and I would put yours for me in the top 5 of all wine bars in Italy.
Thank you very much.
That's not just because we're talking to you. It's
no, thank you though. I appreciate
the
it.
moment
I would say the reason why we're talking to you is because of that, actually. So
okay. Well, thank you very much.
My life, I swear to God, to whomever's listening, you have to go to Enoteca Bellini. I walked through the threshold of that door and I was like, I'm home. I'm where I need to be in this moment. Like talk about the beginning, because I can only imagine how hard it is, having worked in hospitality for so long, that being young, being female, being in an old city that's expensive, like I can't even imagine how to work real estate in Florence.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah. No, it is it's okay. So nothing is easy. I really do believe though, wherever you do something, there's going to be something. So it's good to know the language, in the sense, not just Italian, but the Florentine language, how to interact with Florentines. I'm in a street in the center of Florence that is still very Florentine, and it's a little gem, because a lot of parts of Florence, are not how they used to be, and they've changed a lot, and, a bit more centered around tourism. And I have to say that Via della Spada is still one of those streets where there are people that have had their shops since, or 30 years, or maybe it was their parents and their grandparents. And so I'm very lucky in that sense, but you do need to know how to, how to move in that you're new. So, and everybody knows that you're new. And it's interesting. You feel like a guest. I mean, I grew up here. I mean, but you still feel like a guest. And once you win them over, though, it's great. And I have a lot of support from the street. So that's that's always made it a lot easier. I have to say, at the beginning, it was just me and my dad, and I was running the bar basically by myself. And that was so hard. I think that I'm happy that I was by myself, because if I had somebody else talking to me, I would have questioned so many things. And I just, fake it till you make it. You just keep going on, and,
Mm-hmm.
you learn quickly when you're, by yourself. And then slowly it started to form into something that we really loved and liked. And I've always tried so hard to have local clients. Local clients are not Florentine only anymore, just because so many people have been living here for such a long time. I mean, my mom came here in the early 80s and she never really went back. And she's not the only one. It's full of people that come from all over the world, a lot of Americans, a lot of English, who have lived here for a long time. They work here, and just the local people who live in the area, or after work, before going home, they need a place to like stop by. And you still can't find that place where, like, my mom always jokes and she says it's like Cheers. Your place is like Cheers. I mean, it's like, there's always people that they're gonna be there. And even though you don't really know what do they do, because that's something very Italian that I still hope never goes away. In Italy, it's so common to have a relationship with somebody that you meet every day at your local wine bar, for example, and never know what they actually do for a living, and just talk about anything else. And I love that. I mean, I feel like my American side, you don't find it that much. You always ask, what do you do? That's the first question. In Italy, I've seen people like literally talk to each other for 5 years and have no clue what they do as a job. And one of them could be a lawyer, and the other one could be whatever, like sells fruit and vegetables or whatever. And I love that. And so that's sort of the atmosphere that I really wanted to create in this wine bar in Florence. And then there's the tourist aspect that's very important, because as I was saying before, I mean, a lot of people now that come from out of Italy have such a great passion in wine, and they know more sometimes than a lot of my locals that come all the time. And people have to understand that. Even Italians have to understand it. It doesn't necessarily mean if you're Italian that you get wine or you like wine. And for a long time in Florence, it was normal to serve crappy wine to tourists, or, corked wine, because you're like, oh, they're tourists, they have no idea. But I mean, be careful to do that, because I've had a lot of people come into my wine bar and actually teach me a few things, and they came from all over the place, all over the world, because I think it's the passion that when it's, you get it, then there's no way out, and you go into it so much, you go into it so deep. So, yeah, I mean, that's sort of these aspects of having the locals and the tourists and everything like that. It just made it so much easier. And it is a macho world, but I have to say, the people that were very important to me growing up were all women in this world. It's not like they weren't there. Mm-hmm. So I do have great examples, I have to say. And of course, there's been a few moments where, a few idiots have said a few terrible comments or whatever, but it just made me want to do it more. I mean, it didn't really stop me. So, I mean, it is true, but in Italy, in the restaurant business, I mean, some women, they run it all. I mean, maybe they're more behind the scenes. That's true. I have to admit to that. And there's always a guy who does a lot less, who's the face, maybe. But apart from that, yeah, that happens a lot. But no, but I have to say that I really did have great examples in the food part, in the wine part, because I love the food part as well. It's not just about wine, my wine bar. It's something that I really think it's important. Italian culture teaches you to always have food with alcohol, whatever alcohol you're having. Mm-hmm. And I love that. And so that is something that I really take care of at my wine bar, to have always food with wine. Super important. So, yeah.
And as an experiencer of your food, oh my God. Again, that was one of those other things. I walked in there and you brought the crostone and it just kept coming. And we were like, I was like, we don't need to go to dinner. We still went to dinner afterwards, but I was full. But I just was like, can we just stay here? I mean, I think to set the stage and Danielle, like, jump in with your memories, but like you're walking down this like, and you said it, Camila, this very classic Florentine alley. You're catty corner from the church, Manifaturi, the bars down the street.
Yeah. When did
You
Manifattura
walk
open?
in, yeah.
A year
At the
after I
same time
did,
as you
I
guys?
think.
A year after,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Okay, yeah. So David,
You rule the
yeah,
block.
yeah.
Well,
That's
I
your
think
home.
but I think it's I mean, the people
Well,
that
those
opened
guys
it
had other
actually,
places
yeah,
also. So yeah.
that I used to hang out in when I was a lot younger in a pub. And so, I mean, no, that's the great thing about Florence. You sort of all know each other, but it wasn't like this before. Everybody used to fight about everything. Now the young people are more into, helping each other out and not fighting so much. So I love that. And that's a good thing about that square. We all get along. So.
Yeah, definitely.
And
The vibe is rising tide raises all ships. Like everybody, it brings it all together. Yeah. And that is, I mean, speaking of, what a great 1-2 punch for an evening to hang out, drink some, do some bubbles and wine at Enoteca Bellini, and then cross over to cocktails at Manifattura and keep moving. That's a good night, and you don't even have to move. Yeah,
absolutely, yes.
In addition to producing world-class content, did you know that Wine Enthusiast is also the premier shopping destination for wine lifestyle products? Just visit our shop at wineenthusiast.com, where you'll discover an amazing assortment of unique quality items guaranteed to enhance your wine experience. From glassware and wine openers to thousands of unique wine gifts. Imagine a toy store for wine lovers. And don't forget about protecting your wine. We are the nation's leading retailer of wine storage products. Whether you have 6 or 600 bottles, desire a wine cabinet, or a custom-designed wine room, our free wine storage consultations will help you find the perfect fit for your collection. Visit wineenthusiast.com today. We bring wine to life. Sponsored by Wine Enthusiast Shop.
You alluded to it just now, Danielle, but like my fascination with Italy and champagne. All the great restaurants, all the great wine bars of Italy have awesome champagne lists that even in France put to shame what the French think they can do. The very first wine I had at your wine bar was a champagne. I can't remember the name of it, but I have a picture of it. It has a fox on it.
Yeah, Fulb.
Yeah. Can you talk to us about the obsession of champagne amongst Italians? Because I've done some research. I've been told that Italy is the #1 per capita consumer of champagne. You talk to a lot of champagne producers, they say some of their largest allocations of some of the coolest champagne houses that we like clamor for here in the States go to Italy first. What's the deal? Why do you guys, I mean, I get it, but like it seems like a culturally endemic thing is like we just drink bubbles. Like,
yeah, I mean, it's interesting because actually you had mentioned this in the email, and I started thinking about it a lot. I think champagne has always been around. I mean, I just grew up with champagne. It represents, luxury, but it represents celebration. It's something that you could basically drink at any time of the day. And, it's always been very present for sure in Italy, especially up in the north. I have to say that they're more into it, even more like they'll have it by the glass. Florence has never been a city with champagne by the glass. It works more in a bottle than in a glass, I have to say. But no, and it was a very interesting theme. And so it was funny because I went to lunch at Todo Modo, which is an amazing sort of book shop, but has a little small lunch place, and you can have tea and coffee. And they have wine, and it's right near the wine bar. And I went there with a really good friend of mine. He's a colleague. He sells me wine, and he loves champagne. So I was having lunch with him. And on the table next to us, there were 2 important wine producers of the area of Florence, Paolo Marchionni and Tommaso Ciuffoletti. And so I just ended up with these people, and we just started talking about champagne. Because I told them, like, what is this thing about champagne in Italy? Because it's true. It seems so obvious to me, but why? And I mean, so many things came out of it, and it was a great. So thank you for saying this, because if I had the best conversation ever, and I learned so much. But no, it was just interesting because we noticed as well. Like, I think the Formula Uno this year was the first year that they opened up a Ferrari instead of a champagne, which is crazy.
Right. Yeah.
That's crazy. I never realized that, but I mean, they've always done champagne. They've never done Italian bubbles, so that was interesting. The French have been making champagne for a very long time, a longer time than Italians have been making any sort of bubble. And I think they have a head start for sure, and they're better at it. I mean, this is something that I'm not afraid to say. Especially for my personal taste, I just always enjoy more having champagne than any other bubble. I've always tasted other bubbles, but it's the one that to me is always so much more special, because I mean, it's been centuries. And the Italians, arrived a little bit late on that. And then the other aspect is that French are very good at selling wine. They know what they have, they give value to it, and they go for it. And they've always done it. And you can tell from the market everywhere in the world, the most wine that you see, and especially considered like in a fancy place, is French wine. So yeah, I think it has a lot to do with that. I mean, geographically, we're very close by. I think it's that. I'm not really, it's interesting. I hope that as I go along in this journey, I'll find out more about it. In my case, the wine bar, I just love champagne so much. It was so important in my family, any type of celebration, that it was just so obvious to me to have that, a lot of different options in the wine bar. And my wine bar looks like a place that would have champagne. I think that even if people just automatically walk inside, I mean, it's true that I have a Tante Jet poster that's huge, but I mean, it's a place that just makes you crave champagne. So, I mean, I don't have a perfect answer for that, but for sure, it's a combination of a lot of things. And it's interesting too that Florence is just, I've had champagne by the glass for some reason, and it does not work so much as the bottle. The bottle goes a lot faster than by the glass.
Yeah. That's super interesting. And again, I think the vibe check, when Danielle and I spend a lot of time out and roaming around and grazing and drinking, the hazardous part of our passion and jobs. But there's I'm getting goosebumps thinking. I mean, I've only been to your place twice, and it was within the same week. Like, yes. I have not stopped. I was in your place in December of 2022. I haven't been back since. I have not stopped thinking about your wine bar since that week. And like, I walked in with Madalena and Matteo, and then I brought back a whole crew of American sommeliers, and we're on a text chain. We talk about it a lot, because I think the moment you cross the threshold, like I said, you've got these kind of high top tables on the left, a shelf with mirrors, shelf above them with wines. Then you've got an elevated bar with your little kitchenette, and there's like a toaster oven. It's small. The music is right. The way you dress, your employees have an energy to them too that is elevated. And the moment you walk in, and I want to be your norm. I want to be like, I'm about to be free from some things, and Florence is not going to get enough. I mean, it's going to have enough of me, but I'm going to be there. Hey, Norm. Hey, Jeff. But like, how has the vibe evolved? I mean, because music changes, tastes change. Like you say, you're experimenting with your own sense of palate, but also tradition. How do you keep that vibe going? Because, from 2015 to now, going through COVID, we haven't even touched what you did during COVID. You're almost at a decade of being a wine bar, which is a huge accomplishment in any space in hospitality. So kudos to that, because it's so hard.
Yeah, it is.
But that vibe, it's so good.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot of combinations. For sure, the music. Music is so important to me. I think it's a detail that it touches everything. So I don't understand why people don't pay attention to it. I think it's very important. And then I guess another thing is that the main characters are the people who come. And I cannot stress that enough. I mean, I love people that have a passion, and I love people that are very serious about it, but we're not saving lives. That is something that we always have to remind ourselves in that sense. And it's about the people coming there and having a good time. And that's the main what we want for people to understand, like that you can go there and you're the main character and you're having wine and a good time. And then even my team that I work with, it used to be myself, and then suddenly I had another person, and then another person, and then another person. Now it's a team of 6 almost, I think. Yeah, 6. And it's getting tougher the more they are, but it's more fun too. And I don't feel so alone as I used to be, so isolated. Now it's fun to, we laugh and it's great. And now the clients that come, the local clients, they expect them and they love them. And so they have relationships with them so I'm really happy about that. But the thing is that I've always tried to have people, young people who did not know too much about wine, that loved wine, that liked wine, that wanted to get into wine, but not the people who already studied too much about wine. And there's no disrespect for that. Absolutely. I don't want to seem like to me, it just made people feel more at ease. If you are learning as you're working and you're not scared of that, and you learn as you open up new bottles, you are going to transmit that better to a client, I think. And you're going to have interesting conversations about it. And then it's interesting to see how they evolved as well. I mean, some of them really were not into wine that much. They said they would. I think they just wanted the job. And so maybe lied a little bit. And now they're wine monsters. Like now they're freaks. And now they'll be like, no, I can't drink that. It's not good enough, or this and that. So I love that part. And I think that has to do a lot with it. And people shouldn't be scared if they don't know about stuff. If you're open to it. And my mom has always told me, you just need to drink a lot of wine to understand wine. I mean, that's basically the key. Don't read too many books. I mean, it's good to read books and everything, but it's good to just drink it too. And enjoy it and see, why do I like this more than that? And so I think that's sort of what creates the atmosphere too, that it's not so uptight. Maybe, I don't know if that's maybe a good word, I guess. I don't know.
Definitely.
Totally.
And I think that brings us to a perfect point for concluding here also, because what we were hoping to get to was what makes, this question of education, comfort, what do people not know that they should know? And when we're talking to somebody like you, we're excited to hear what you're excited about. That's it. You're not because you're an expert or because you're better at it than anybody, but because of the passion and the energy, right? That's the thing that is the dividing line. We can all read a lot of books. I've read a whole bunch of them. Hasn't necessarily helped me.
You've written a book?
I've written a couple as well, absolutely, but that has not necessarily made me a more content member of society. But drinking wine has, on the other hand, right? And so, maybe as a little fun way of wrapping up here, we could just ask you also, where are the places that you go when you're not at work? What are the things that you drink when you're not worried about, I think the description you gave earlier was so great. A wine, the best kind of wine is the wine that you don't think about while you're drinking it because you're having such a good time. But then later on you say, oh man, that was amazing. It was like there was a hole in that bottle. We went right through it. Right. Yeah. So, what are the things that you're popping for yourself? Where are the places that you go? Or maybe even more broadly, what are the things that you're kind of thinking about right now that are at the top of your list in terms of Italian wine for people who are listening and getting excited and thirsty to us right now?
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, in Florence, especially, I go to always sort of the same places. I don't like to think about it too much. I feel like Florence is where I live and work. And so, I just have the security blankets, when I'm not working and I need to go to a place that I don't want to think about too much. I mean, it's always nice to see what's going on, what's opening. But there's always those 3 places that to me are the best in the world. And that's just where I love to go without even thinking. When I do travel, I do put a lot more effort in trying new places and looking for things that are different. I have to say something that I really have seen a lot in London and I've seen here as well. It's the new idea of having places where you have small plates and you have many different options. And it's not just the traditional appetizer, and then the first course, and then the main course, and you have these long hours of sitting down, which is great, but you need that like more on a Sunday or a certain occasion, like Italian style, not every day. And to have a lot of different plates and you can combine with glasses of wine, I think that is the best fun that you can have is ordering small plates with 3 different glasses of wine and just seeing how they sort of go with each other, if they don't, which works better. And so those are the places that I think are the future. People don't have hours, like they don't eat all at the same time anymore. It's not like people have lunch at the same time. Even in Italy, this is changing. You might not be able to have lunch until 3:00, and a lot of trattoria, they close at 2:30, the kitchen. And so people are desperate. And that's what I'm going to do next year. I want to open for lunch again, because originally we were always open for lunch. And then after COVID, we didn't for a while. And that was okay, because we worked so well in the evening that it was perfect. But now I want to go back to that, because I want to give that option of having different, small plates of different types of food, that it's always about quality and seasonal foods and the combination with the wine. And so that is something that I'm looking forward to, that I'm going to do for sure in my wine bar. And I can see that it's happening in other places as well. Because I just think our lifestyle is so different from how it used to be.
I think Jeff probably would also agree with this, that it's just like bringing us back to the idea that it's all about creating community, right? So like you're wanting to offer that because it's part of your business model and it's practical, and it's a nice thing to be able to be open and people know that they can stumble in and bring it, and allowing people to have just a good and a gastronomic experience. But it's essentially about the fact that you're also serving a need and letting people know that they can always be welcome. And that's like,
absolutely,
that's what we're trying to get to, I think, right?
Yeah. And like what I was saying before, I guess when I was younger, it didn't really matter if there was food when I was drinking, because, you go to parties and it doesn't really, there's maybe popcorn on the table, whatever. But, as I'm getting older, I realize how these two things need to go together. Absolutely. I think it's so important that even if it's just a small piece of cheese, even if it's just a small thing, it just changes the experience in your mouth completely, with especially wine. And I think that is something that I'm looking forward, that I can see that people are getting into that and are understanding that a lot more. And it's so personal too. I mean, my grandmother used to say, in the stomach, it's dark. So and I always thought that was pretty funny, but now I'm changing my mind a little bit about this. I mean, it's so interesting how it completely changes, and it just creates a little package, of something that is so delicious and great, and you don't need that much of it, and it just goes a long way. So yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to, for sure.
I think again, to fawn over your brilliance, is that as a person who loves hospitality and gets frustrated when I travel and I see people that don't have intention, like you've mentioned all the things, like when I think of great places, music, hiring for passion versus knowledge, just the way you set the table for community. That intention is key, and you can feel it, and that's what separates you from other operators within Florence and globally. So I want to thank you for that intention and give you the props, the deserved props, because not everybody thinks in intentional manners. They think of financial manners, and they think of all the things that don't build community, and that's a beautiful thing.
No, I think I would just be so bored if I didn't.
Right? Well, I've met a lot of boring operators. But one last thing, I haven't, unlike Danielle, I haven't lived in Florence. I love visiting, but let's say, Danielle, we're going to come together. We're going to visit you. Quick rapid fire. Where do we go for coffee? Where do we meet in the morning?
I would say the bar in front of my wine bar. It's old school. It's old school. They look at you funny, but they're so sweet. Once you get into their hearts, it's the real Florence. It's how it used to be. And it was the first place where they started making these juices, because a client of theirs had a daughter that had cancer, and it was the 80s, and they started doing these special juices that they started thinking like maybe what you eat could really impact if you're sick, your sickness. And so I just love that place. It was run by the family. So yeah, they have like 3 names. It's like San Pancrazio, but it's exactly in front of the wine bar, and it's not fancy at all, but it's just, I've never seen a place so clean. And they inspire me so much how they keep the order there. And I don't know, it's all women too who run it. So I don't know, I love it. I think it's a good place. I mean, there's so many other places, but that's the place that has kept me alive for 8 years, I think. So I have to.
I mean, there you go.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah.
Where do we get gelato?
Gelato, I'm not the great person to ask. I don't really like it that much, but
well, then skip.
Piazza Tasso, La Sorbettiera, for sure.
I agree. I agree
place
with that. I agree with that.
I like that place a lot.
I live around the corner from there, so I have a soft spot.
Oh yeah, dangerous one, Negroni. Where do we get our Negroni?
Negroni. I mean, Manifattura. You can't really go wrong.
Keep the local.
Yeah, exactly. Manifattura. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Martini, I can say Fusion Bar. It's important. Martinis are very important in my life. Fusion Bar has amazing martini.
And my last question is, what is the one super touristy place in Florence, like a site, not a restaurant or anything like that still you get inspiration from?
I guess Palazzo Palatini. I mean, La Palatina, the one in Piazza Pitti. Because it's where the Medici family used to live, and it's so interesting, and the paintings, and there's always some reference about grapes or wine or food or something. I don't know. I guess that's the first thing that came into my mind. That for sure. And then, I mean, I do have the Museo Marino Marini in my square, and that is just such an important space too, because it's so different from the, from the art that we see every day. I mean, that we're surrounded, because Marino Marini was an artist from the 1900s. So, I mean, that's an inspiration as well. I mean, those two places, I guess. Yeah, for sure.
That's nice. That's a tight ring you gave us. We keep it all in 100 metri al massimo.
Well, yeah. I mean, that is Italian. I mean, style. Absolutely. That's how.
Do you live upstairs? Like you go 10 meters square.
I almost no. I live on the other side of the river, and I love the fact that the river divides it. I'm in San Filiano, and it's one of the best areas, and that for sure divides. Work and life and everything. So, yeah. Which is 7 minutes on my bike still. I mean, it's not like it's that still far away.
Florence is still,
for Americans,
it's far enough.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, unsurprisingly,
thank you
we went over because we love talking to you, and we're so excited.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you.
No, we're so appreciative of having you and your time, and we hope. I can't imagine that anybody has listened and not been excited enough to book themselves a trip and with first stop Enoteca Bellini. But more importantly, hopefully, it inspired everybody to just start thinking about hospitality and community in tandem with Italian wine and with wine more generally, because those are the things that exactly give the value that transcends any single bottle or any single place or any single person. So thank you so much again, Camilla.
Well, thank you guys for talking to me. Yes.
It's our pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
Grazie mille.
Grazie a voi.
Arrivederci.
Wine bars have become increasingly ubiquitous over the years. And while they all serve wine, they're not all created equally. Yes, good wine bars should offer a great gastronomic experience and a stellar wine list. But the really great ones are intentionally creating community, making sure all of their guests return. What are your thoughts? If you liked today's episode, we'd love to read your reviews and hear what you think. You can email us your comments and questions at podcast@wineenthusiast.net. And hey, why not tell your wine-loving friends to check us out too? Remember, you can subscribe to this podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. You can also go to wineenthusiast.com/podcasts for more episodes and transcripts. I'm JC Tops. Thanks for listening.